My wife used to love me as I was, but after I got a big promotion, he started demanding luxuries and calling me a poor fool. Now he hands me divorce papers and says he deserves better. Part 1. The early days. When I first met Laura, I was just 24, working as an entry-level analyst at a small financial firm downtown. My job was nothing glamorous, long hours crunching numbers in a cubicle, barely making enough to cover rent and student loans. But Laura didn't care about that. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue, and from the moment I saw her, I was smitten. She was everything I wasn't: vibrant, outgoing, and full of life. She worked as a preschool teacher and loved her job. She always talked about how much joy she got from working with kids, seeing their faces light up when they learned something new. Our early days together were filled with simplicity and laughter. We spent weekends exploring the city, finding hidden coffee shops, and watching the sunset at the beach. Our dates were cheap, but they were rich with conversation and connection. Laura had a way of making everything seem special, even if it was just sitting on the couch binge watching old movies. She would snuggle up next to me, her head on my chest, and tell me that as long as we had each other, nothing else mattered. And I believed her. Her love felt like a promise that everything would be okay. We got married in a small ceremony in her parents' VDJ Latam backyard. It wasn't VDA, TMT, anything fancy, just close friends and family, some fairy lights, and a lot of love. I remember looking into Laura's eyes as we said our vows, feeling like the luckiest man alive. She was my world, and I promised to take care of her, to give her the life she deserved. She smiled and said she didn't need anything fancy, just me. Part 2. Climbing the ladder. As the years went by, I worked hard to climb the ranks at my firm. I put in long hours, sacrificed weekends, and missed countless family gatherings. I did it all for Laura, to provide for her and give her the life she deserved. I wanted to fulfill the promise I made on our wedding day. Laura supported me, always encouraging me and telling me how proud she was. But as I worked harder, I started to notice a change in her. I finally got my big break nearly a decade into my career. I was promoted to a senior management position, which came with a significant salary increase and a corner office with a view of the city skyline. I was over the moon. This promotion meant everything to me. I could finally give Laura the life I thought she deserved. That night, I brought home a bottle of champagne, eager to celebrate with her. Laura was genuinely happy for me. She hugged me tight and told me how proud she was. But then she started talking about how our lives were going to change, how we could finally afford the things we had always dreamed of. She talked about moving to a bigger house, buying a new car, and taking vacations to exotic destinations. At first, I didn't mind. I wanted to give her the world. We moved into a bigger house in a nicer neighborhood, bought a new car, and started dining at upscale restaurants. I thought these changes would make Laura happy, that they would bring us closer together. Part 3. The growing gap. As the months went by, Laura's demands grew more extravagant. She wanted designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and weekends away at luxurious resorts. She started comparing our lives to those of her friends, who seemed to have everything. Whenever I hesitated or suggested we should be more mindful of our spending, she would call me a poor fool and accuse me of being cheap. The first time she said it, I laughed it off, thinking she was joking. But she wasn't. She was dead serious. And the more she said it, the more it stung. I tried to reason with her, to explain that we needed to be careful with our finances, but Laura wouldn't listen. She became increasingly distant, spending more time with her friends and less time with me. Our once loving relationship was now filled with tension and arguments. I remember one particular fight vividly. It was a Saturday night, and we were supposed to go out for dinner. Laura had bought a new dress and wanted me to take her to an expensive restaurant downtown. I suggested we try a new bistro that had just opened up nearby instead. It was supposed to be cozy and charming, but it wasn't V-Day TMT what Laura had in mind. She flew into a rage, calling me a poor fool who didn't get time to know how to treat his wife. I was stunned. This was in VJ TMT, the Laura I knew. The woman who used to say that as long as we had each other, nothing else mattered. Part 4. The ultimatum. One evening, after yet another argument about money, Laura handed me a stack of papers. At first, I thought they were more bills or receipts, but as I looked closer, I realized they were divorce papers. My heart sank. Laura looked at me with cold, unfeeling eyes and said, "I deserve better." I was in shock. I couldn't believe that the woman who once loved me for who I was, who promised to stand by me through thick and thin, was now ready to walk away because I couldn't meet her endless demands. I begged her to reconsider, to remember the love we once shared, but she was resolute. Laura moved out the next day, leaving me alone in our big, empty house. I felt like my world had crumbled. The promotion that once seemed like a dream come true had turned into a nightmare. I tried to go about my daily routine, but everything felt hollow. I couldn't concentrate at work, and my performance started to slip. My colleagues noticed the change in me, but I brushed off their concerns. I didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to face the reality of my broken marriage. Part 5. The Aftermath. The weeks following Laura's departure were the darkest of my life. I threw myself into my work, trying to numb the pain of her absence. I started working even longer hours, avoiding going home to the empty house that now felt like a prison. I missed Laura terribly, despite everything. I missed her laughter, her warmth, the way she used to look at me with love in her eyes. Now all I could see was the cold, calculating woman who left me because I couldn't give her the life she wanted. I spent many nights lying awake, replaying our last conversation over and over in my mind. What had I done wrong? How had things gone so terribly wrong? I started questioning everything, my priorities, my decisions, my worth as a husband. I felt like a failure. As the months went by, I started to reflect on what went wrong. Had I been so focused on my career that I neglected my wife? Had I failed to see the signs of her growing dissatisfaction? I realized that while I had been working hard to provide for Laura, I had not been truly present in our relationship. I had taken her love for granted, assuming that it would withstand any storm. Part 6. A New Perspective. In my darkest moments, I turned to therapy. I needed to understand and process my emotions, to figure out where I went wrong and how I could move forward. My therapist helped me see that Laura's demands were not just about money. They were a symptom of a deeper issue. She felt unfulfilled, and instead of addressing the root cause, she tried to fill the void with material possessions. Through therapy, I started to see things more clearly. I had been so focused on my career and providing for Laura financially that I had neglected her emotional needs. I had taken her love for granted, assuming that it would always be there. But love needs to be nurtured and cared for, and I had failed to do that. I also realized that I needed to take better care of myself. I started exercising regularly, eating healthier, and making time for hobbies and activities that brought me joy. I reconnected with old friends and made an effort to build a support network. Slowly, I began to find a sense of peace. I also started volunteering at a local shelter, helping those who were less fortunate. It gave me a new perspective on life and reminded me of the importance of compassion and kindness. I realized that I had the power to create positive change, both in my life and in the lives of others. Part 7. Rebuilding. As time passed, I began to heal. I learned to let go of the pain and resentment, to forgive Laura and myself. I understood that we were both flawed individuals who made mistakes. Holding on to anger would only keep me trapped in the past. I started dating again, cautiously at first. I met new people, made new connections, and slowly opened my heart to the possibility of love. It wasn't easy, but I knew that I deserved happiness, just as much as anyone else. One evening, while sorting through old photos, I came across a picture of Laura and me on our wedding day. We looked so happy, so full of hope. It made me realize that despite everything, I would always cherish the good times we shared. They were a part of my story, a part of who I was. I also realized that the promotion, the money, the material possessions, they were all fleeting. What truly mattered was the love and connection we shared with others. I vowed to never lose sight of that again. Part 8. A New Love. Sunny afternoon, I met someone new. Her name was Emily, and she was unlike anyone I had ever met. We were introduced by a mutual friend at a small gathering, and we hit it off immediately. Emily was warm, kind, and genuine. She worked as a nurse and had a passion for helping others. Our relationship started slowly. We would go for walks in the park, have long conversations over coffee, and spend quiet evenings cooking dinner together. Emily wasn't interested in expensive gifts or extravagant vacations. She valued experiences and connections, and she appreciated the simple things in life. Being with Emily was like a breath of fresh air. She taught me to slow down and appreciate the present moment. She showed me that true happiness comes from within, from being true to oneself and cherishing the relationships that matter. With her, I felt a sense of peace and contentment that I hadn't felt in years. Part 9. Moving forward. As my relationship with Emily deepened, I realized that I had finally found what I had been searching for. It wasn't about money or status, it was about love, connection, and mutual respect. Emily and I supported each other, encouraged each other, and made each other better. We moved in together and started building a life that was filled with love and joy. We traveled, explored new places, and created beautiful memories. But more importantly, we supported each other's dreams and aspirations. Emily continued her work as a nurse, and I found a new passion in volunteering and giving back to the community. I also found a new balance in my career. I continued to work hard, but I made sure to prioritize my personal life and relationships. I learned to set boundaries, to say no when necessary, and to take time for myself. My career was important, but it was everything. My happiness and well-being came first. Part 10. The future today, I am in a much better place. I have found a balance between my career and personal life, and I am surrounded by people who genuinely care about me. I have learned to appreciate the simple joys in life, to find happiness in the little things. Laura and I are no longer in contact, but I hope she has found the fulfillment she was seeking. I wish her nothing but the best. As for me, I am excited about the future. I know that there will be challenges and setbacks, but I'm confident in my ability to overcome them. I have learned that true happiness comes from within, from being true to oneself and cherishing the relationships that matter. Life may not have turned out the way I expected, but I am grateful for the journey. It has made me stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. And for that, I'm thankful. Emily and I are planning our future together, and I'm looking forward to the adventures that lie ahead. I know that with her by my side, I can face anything. I have learned that the most important things in life are not material possessions, but the love and connections we share with others. I've also learned that it is never too late to change, to grow, and to find happiness. Life is a journey, and it is up to us to make the most of it. I am grateful for the lessons I have learned, and I'm excited for what the future holds. As I look back on my life, I see that every experience, every challenge, and every setback has brought me to where I am today. I have learned to appreciate the journey, to embrace the ups and downs, and to find joy in the present moment. And most importantly, I have learned to love and appreciate myself for who I am. In the end, that is all that matters. Are you ready for the next story? My parents and my twin sister kicked me out when I was 16. I lived in a tent and struggled for years. Now I have a house, but my sister's family and her family came uninvited and asked me to move out. Part 1. The beginning. Growing up in a small town, my life seemed pretty normal. My parents were hardworking folks who valued discipline and order above all else. My twin sister Emily and I shared everything VDJ, from our toys to our dreams of the future. We were close, or so I thought. Things started changing when we turned 16. I don't know what I did wrong, but suddenly my parents and Emily turned against me. One night, after a particularly heated argument over something trivial, my father gave me an ultimatum: leave the house or face the consequences. His face was red with anger, and my mother stood silently behind him, her eyes cold and unyielding. I was in shock. How could they turn on me like this? With nowhere to go and no one to turn to, I packed a small bag with the essentials and left. I spent my first night on a park bench, cold and scared. The next day, I found an old tent in the garage and set it up in a nearby wooded area. As I walked away from the only home I had ever known, the weight of my situation began to sink in. I was stunned, heartbroken, and angry. I couldn't understand how my own family could do this to me. I had no money, no job, and nowhere to go. My friends' parents were unwilling to take me in, and I couldn't blame them. They had their own problems to deal with. So I set up my tent in a small patch of woods just outside of town and tried to figure out what to do next. Part 2. Life in a tent. Living in a tent was a harsh wake-up call. I had no money, no food, and no support. The nights were cold, and the days were long and lonely. I had to learn to fend for myself quickly. During the day, I would search for odd jobs, doing anything I could to earn a few dollars. I mowed lawns, cleaned gutters, and even picked up trash. At night, I would return to my tent, exhausted and hungry. The hardest part was the loneliness. I missed my family, especially Emily. We had been inseparable, sharing everything from secrets to dreams. Now, she wouldn't even look at me. I tried to reach out to her, but she ignored me. The rejection hurt more than the hunger or the cold. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. I learned to survive on very little, finding creative ways to make money and scavenge for food. I would collect cans and bottles to recycle for cash, and I even learned how to fish in a nearby stream. I became resourceful out of necessity, but the isolation was taking its toll on me. I felt invisible, like I didn't matter to anyone. Part 3. Finding hope. After a few months of living in the tent, I met a man named Mike. He was a retired carpenter who saw me working one day and offered me a job. Mike became a mentor to me, teaching me everything he knew about carpentry. He also gave me a place to stay in his workshop, which was a step up from the tent. Working with Mike gave me a sense of purpose and hope. I started to save money, dreaming of the day I could have my own place. Mike's kindness and guidance were a lifeline during those dark times. He showed me that there were still good people in the world and that maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild my life. Mike was more than just a boss. He was like the father I had lost. He listened to my story, offered advice, and encouraged me to believe in myself. He taught me the value of hard work and perseverance. With his support, I started to regain my self-confidence. I was no longer just a homeless teenager. I was an apprentice carpenter with a future. Part 4. Climbing up. Over the next few years, I worked hard and saved every penny I could. I moved from job to job, always looking for better opportunities. I learned new skills, took night classes, and slowly started to build a future for myself. It wasn't easy, but I was determined to make something of myself. Eventually, I landed a job with a construction company that paid well. With a steady income and some savings, I was finally able to rent a small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I had a place to call home. I decorated it with secondhand furniture and made it cozy. It felt like a fresh start. Having a roof over my head and a stable job gave me a newfound sense of security. I continued to work hard and save money, always with the goal of buying my own house someday. I made friends with my neighbors, got involved in the community, and even started dating. Life was looking up, and I was grateful for every small victory. Part 5. Building a home. As I settled into my new life, I continued to work hard and save money. I wanted more than just an apartment. I wanted a home of my own. I started looking at houses, dreaming of a place where I could put down roots and build a future. After years of saving and careful planning, I finally bought a small house on the outskirts of town. It was a fixer-upper, but I didn't mind. With the skills I had learned from Mike and my experience in construction, I was confident I could turn it into something beautiful. I spent every spare moment working on the house, transforming it into a warm and welcoming home. My new home was everything I had dreamed of and more. It was a symbol of how far I had come and the hard work that had gotten me there. I decorated it with care, filling it with things that made me happy. I planted a garden in the backyard and started growing my own vegetables. It was a simple life, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. My home became a place of refuge and healing. Each project I completed, from painting the walls to repairing the roof, was a step toward reclaiming my life. The sense of accomplishment I felt every time I finished a task was a powerful antidote to the years of struggle and hardship. Part 6. A new beginning. My new home was everything I had dreamed of and more. It was a symbol of how far I had come and the hard work that had gotten me there. I decorated it with care, filling it with things that made me happy. I planted a garden in the backyard and started growing my own vegetables. It was a simple life, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. Life was good. I had a steady job, a home of my own, and a sense of accomplishment. I had even started to make friends in the neighborhood. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I was happy and content, and I thought my struggles were behind me. My garden became my sanctuary. I would spend hours tending to my plants, finding peace in the rhythm of the work. I grew tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and herbs. There was something incredibly satisfying about eating food I had grown myself. It connected me to the earth and reminded me of how far I had come. The house itself was my pride and joy. I painted the walls in warm, inviting colors, furnished it with a mix of old and new pieces, and filled it with memories of my journey. It was not just a house. It was a testament to my resilience and determination. Part 7. The unexpected visit. One sunny afternoon, as I was tending to my garden, I heard a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I was surprised to see Emily standing on my doorstep. She looked different, older, and more tired than I remembered. Behind her stood her husband and their 2 children. "Hi, John," she said hesitantly. "Can we come in?" I was stunned. After all these years, she was here, standing in front of me. I stepped aside and let them in, still trying to process what was happening. They made themselves comfortable in my living room, and Emily started to explain why they were there. Emily told me that they had fallen on hard times. Her husband had lost his job, and they were struggling to make ends meet. They had lost their home and had nowhere else to go. She asked if they could stay with me for a while until they got back on their feet. My first instinct was to say no. After everything they had put me through, why should I help them? But as I looked at Emily and her family, I could see the desperation in their eyes. They were in the same position I had been in all those years ago. I knew what it felt like to have nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Part 8. Family troubles. Reluctantly, I agreed to let them stay, but I made it clear that it was only temporary. I set some ground rules and hoped for the best. Living with Emily and her family was not easy. The house felt cramped and tensions ran high. I could tell they were grateful, but there was also a sense of entitlement that bothered me. They didn't seem to understand the sacrifices I had made to get to where I was. Emily tried to reconnect with me, but it was difficult. There was too much hurt and resentment between us. We had changed so much over the years, and it was hard to find common ground. Her husband was polite but distant, and the children were unruly and disruptive. Part 9. Living together. Despite the challenges, I did my best to help them. I shared my food, gave them space, and tried to be patient. But as the weeks turned into months, I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. They were taking over, and I was beginning to feel suffocated. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at work, I came home to find Emily and her family sitting in the living room, looking serious. Emily stood up and said, "John, we need to talk." She explained that they had found a new place to live but needed more time to save up this deposit. She asked if they could stay for a few more months. I was tired and frustrated, but I agreed, hoping it would give them the time they needed. Then her husband spoke up. "Actually, we were thinking it might be better if you moved out instead," he said. "This house is bigger than we need, and it would be easier for us to get back on our feet if we had more space." I was speechless. They were asking me to leave my own home so they could stay. After everything I'd been through, they wanted to take the one thing I'd worked so hard to build. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. Part 10. The final straw. "No," I said firmly. "This is my home. I worked for it, and I won't leave. You need to find another solution." Emily started to protest, but I stood my ground. I had come too far and fought too hard to let anyone take this away from me. They left a few weeks later, and I was finally able to reclaim my home. It was a difficult experience, but it taught me an important lesson. No matter how much you try to help others, you have to take care of yourself first. I'd finally learned to stand up for myself and protect what I had built. And in the end, that made all the difference. After they left, I took some time to reflect on everything that had happened. It was clear that my relationship with Emily and my parents was beyond repair. I realized that I needed to move on and focus on my own happiness. I continued to work on my house, making it even more beautiful and comfortable. I expanded my garden and started raising chickens. My little home became a place of peace and tranquility, a sanctuary where I could heal and grow. In the years that followed, I found new friends who became like family to me. I built a life filled with love, laughter, and purpose. I volunteered at local shelters, helping others who were going through hard times, just as I had. It was my way of giving back and paying forward the kindness that Mike had shown me. As I sit here in my garden, surrounded by the fruits of my labor, I feel a deep sense of gratitude. I'm grateful for the challenges I faced, for they made me stronger and more resilient. I am grateful for the people who helped me along the way, for they showed me the power of kindness and compassion. And most of all, I am grateful for my home, for it is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of hope. This is my story, a story of survival, perseverance, and triumph. It is a story of finding light in the darkest of times and building a life worth living. And it is a story that I hope will inspire others to never give up, no matter how tough things get. Because if I can make it through, so can you.